Hello, I'm Jyotika. In today's class, I will be solving paper 2 sample paper for Edexcel GCSE Psychology. If you want to download this paper, it is available on the official Edexcel website, and this lesson should be useful to all students following an international curriculum, be it Edexcel, AQA, Cambridge, IBDP, because research methods is common to all these boards, and the type of questions that come and the way of answering them is more or less the same across boards. Okay, I know students like very precise and to the point videos, so I'll start right away. Of course, I will be giving you answers in this video. I will show you how to write the answers also, and I will explain to you what is my thought process behind writing the answers, so you should know how you should be thinking when you're answering, and I'll give you some tips that are relevant to every type of question. Okay, so I'm beginning with question 1 in section A. I'm reading out the question first. So first tip is to read the question carefully. Samad asks students to take part in a study. 6 boys and 2 girls agree to take part. He tests the recall of the students by showing them 15 words and giving them a 5-second interference task. Then the students are given a set of 15 words and a 25-second interference task. Identify the experimental research design used in Samad's study. Okay, they've given us 4 options here. Just to quickly remember what these designs are about, independent measures design is when different groups of participants are exposed to different treatments in a study. Matched pairs design is when different groups of participants are exposed to different treatments, but they have been matched with respect to some participant variable, which could possibly confound results. Mixed design is a combination of independent measures and repeated measures design. And finally, repeated measures design is when the same set of participants are exposed to all treatments in the experiment. So, what we have to do is, in terms of thought process, just mentally check out which of these 4 is applicable to the given scenario, and then we have to mark out the correct option from the 4 given. One tip before we answer this question is, although there's nothing much to be said in the way of these questions because they're very straightforward, they're the most straightforward type of questions in the paper, still the mistake that students make, which we find repeatedly it's mentioned in examiner reports, is that they don't read exactly how many options are to be picked out. Like in this case, it's simple. We just have to pick out one definite answer. In some questions like these, we have to pick up 2 or 3 answers, which can all be correct. So that we just need to read carefully how many options we need to pick out, and we should just cross check with the number of marks allotted. Your 1 mark is allotted, so it's obvious that one option has to be picked up. If 2 or 3 options had to be picked up, there would be 2 or 3 marks allotted to this question. So always make it a point to just take a look at the marks which have been given for the question. Then you're less likely to make mistakes. Okay, now coming back to the question. Here, if we read the question, there is no mention of there being 2 separate groups. In fact, they just talk about the students. Very obviously, they're talking about one group or one pair of students. And they mention that these students are first undergoing some 5-second interference task. Then the same students, although they don't use the word same, it's obvious because they have not mentioned that there's any separation. So the same students are also undergoing the 25-second interference task. That matches with our definition of repeated measures design. Now, how we have to answer is all we have to do the outline which is given. We just have to put a cross mark into that. Don't mark in any other way other than the one suggested in the paper. Even that goes wrong. So don't put a tick mark. Don't circle. Don't do those type of things. If you're confused about how to answer, just read here. The instructions are given. So take a minute and read. That is better than making a mistake. Okay, so that is all I have to say for question 1. Let's move towards question 2. Okay, what is done is in paper 2, that same scenario which is there, all the questions come from there only. So we are continuing with same Samaj scenario. Here they've asked us give two reasons why the sample used in this study is not representative. And they've allotted 2 marks for this answer. Okay, now this is one question where the mistake that students make is they will give very, very generic reasons. They will not refer to the scenario at all when they are answering. And this is not a mistake only in this type of question. This is a mistake they make in all types of scenario based questions. So, what they'll do is they'll read, for example, that okay, there are 6 boys, 2 girls. So, we can see the sample size is small. So, what they'll write is sample size is small. This is what we call a very generic answer, because generally we know that when sample sizes are small, they do not represent the population. But how is that being specific to Samaj study? Why have they given you an entire scenario if they don't want you to refer to it at all? Then they could have just directly asked you an AO1 type of descriptive question. What properties make a sample less representative? The fact that they've given you the whole scenario and then they're asking you the question means that they want you to refer to the scenario. So, no doubt you don't have to elaborate too much because only 2 marks are allotted. So, only 1 mark is there for per reason. But it cannot be that brief also that it's purely descriptive and there's no reference at all. So, what you do is you do mention the sample size is small, but to make it specific to the scenario. And listen to this very carefully. You use wording from the scenario. So, you pick out wording from the scenario, and with the help of that, you indicate that the sample size is small. So, what you would say is since there are a total of only 8 participants in the study, it is not representative. Another thing students would notice is 6 boys and 2 girls. That means there is unequal gender representation or unequal gender distribution. Again, you don't just write unequal gender distribution. You mention that there are 6 boys as against only 2 girls, and that is why gender distribution is unequal. Again, use wording from the scenario. When you write and when you read to check your answer, make sure there is wording from the situation which has been given. Okay, let's see how to write this. So we would write one reason is that there are a total of only 8 participants in the sample. Another reason is that the gender representation of girls is skewed since there are only 2 girls as compared to 6 boys. Again, there are other possibilities also of answers. Firstly, the way I write is also like a sample answer or a model answer, and the content I've covered is also sample. It's not that there's no other possibility or you can't give any other point. You can give other points. For example, I guess they're volunteers because they agreed to take part in the study. So if you want to raise that issue, you can point out they're volunteers, and we know volunteer sampling does yield an unrepresentative sample. So them being volunteers can be a part of the content that you cover. Also, I said the style of writing for in your case might be different. But what I've pointed out that you need to refer to the scenario, that's the most essential thing. So no matter what your writing style is, if you're making sure to make it an AO2 answer, an application answer rather than just purely AO1, descriptive answer, then you are in the correct direction. Okay, so that is it for question 1. Let us move towards, okay, sorry, there is more to this. So let us move towards question 1C. Okay, next they have shown us the results of Samaj study. And what we should do whenever there's a table in front of us, we should read the title of the table. Now, here there's no naming as such, they've just titled it as Table 1. And so we understand, okay, it's about results of Samaj study. Next, we should look at the columns. The first column is just giving us serial number of the participants. Second column is talking about condition A in which they participated, which we have already seen. 5-second interference task is what they had to perform in that condition. So, how many words they have recalled after that condition is presented in this column. Okay, then condition B is given, that is which we had seen, they had to then perform a 25-second interference task. How many words they have recalled after that condition is given in the third column. Okay, now we will have to make a reference to this table as we answer the following questions. So part 1 within 1C is asking us to complete the bar chart for condition B, including the label and the scale for x-axis. So for y-axis, most important thing is to read very carefully, because what they have done is they have given us an incomplete bar graph. Now, exactly what do they want us to complete over here? We should have full clarity before we start drawing anything over here. So, they want us to cover the label. Label of what? Of the y-axis. So, we should keep in mind like this. First, I have to give a label to y-axis. They also want me to cover the scale for y-axis. See what students will do? They'll just read y-axis, they'll just give a label. They won't give a scale for it. So that's why it's important to read. So I have to cover scale of y-axis. I'm writing here anything you should not write on your question paper. I'm writing it because I'm demonstrating to you. I want you to think these things mentally and hold them in your mind. Okay, and they want you to draw the bar chart for condition B, which means that in condition B, if any bar is missing, then we need to cover that also in the graph. So let us look at the graph once again. In condition B, they have covered up to F. But in the table, if we see, there is also G and H. So there are two participants, G and H, whose data is not covered in the graph. So that means we have to draw that data. In the sense, we have to draw the bars for those two participants, G and H. So what we have to draw is bars for G and H. And here we can see 3 marks are there. That means we will get 1 mark for labeling the y-axis, 1 mark for scaling the y-axis, and 1 mark for drawing the bars for G and H, of course, appropriately. Let's begin with labeling the y-axis. That's the easiest also, and that will guide us on how to draw further. Okay, firstly, I hope you know where is your x and where is your y-axis. X-axis is always the horizontal one. You can label it also for reference. There's no issue in that. And y-axis is always the perpendicular vertical axis. So this is y. Okay, now we have to label y. In a bar chart, on the x-axis, always participants or groups are represented. On the y-axis, always frequencies are represented. Frequencies are also counts or numbers. So this question, they have continuously been telling us that number of words recalled is what is there on the table. And not only that, here also, in terms of the title, in that also they have mentioned number of words recalled. So if we have learned our bar chart properly and we know that y-axis contains frequency, it's very easy to identify that here what we need to write is number of words recalled and be complete. Don't just write number of words recalled, write from a list of 15 words. The best guideline here is to follow the title. So in the title, how they have written it is number of words recalled from a list of 15 words. When they begin with participants and all, that we know is there on the x-axis. So we don't need to make a mention of participants here. So till they have given till the word participants, all that wording we should include on the y-axis. Next, we had marked that we will also draw the scale for the y-axis. I've just made a slight mistake here, so I'll just quickly correct that. Okay, what I should have done is I should have just left some space to be able to draw the scale. So I'll just shift the title little outward quickly. Number of words recalled from a list of 15 words. Okay, now we have to give the scale. Scale, as we know, generally for y-axis, it is that 1 centimeter represents 1 unit as such. But sometimes it can be that to be able to fully represent or to be able to fully condense, they have taken it as uh, zero point 0.5 centimeter, that is half a centimeter represents 1 unit. That is possible. So what we should do is we should just look at the first one or two bars to get an idea of how they must have done the scaling. We can't give any scale of our choice because half the bar graph is already drawn. So we can't just begin with any scaling that we feel is appropriate. We'll have to follow the scale of the remaining bars which are already there. So if we see bar A, for example, it is reaching a certain point. Now, if we look at the table, the number of words recalled by participant A are 5. Okay, so here, of course, A should be reaching till the 5th unit. That is still 5 number of words recalled. It's very simple here. We can just see the number of squares being covered is 5. Now, just to double check that this is indeed the case, we can see B has recalled 6 words. So, the bar for B is reaching 6 squares. And just because I'm demonstrating, we don't need to check so much, but just to make it more clear, C has recalled 4 words 1, 2, 3, and 4. So here what they have done is they have taken half a centimeter or 0.5 centimeter to represent 1 unit, that is 1 word recalled. So we need to follow that pattern. We don't have to write the scale as such. We just have to, in the sense, we don't have to write the key for the scale. We just have to number the scale on the y-axis. So as such, we don't need to worry about how many centimeters is covering, how many numbers. That I've just done to explain to you. What we have to do always, that much I always write in blue. So anything that I've written in any other ink color, please ignore that. Those are just markings for explanation. What we have to draw in the paper or write is the units like this 1, 2, 3, 4. So literally just writing the numbers for the scale of y-axis. Okay, now it becomes easy for us to draw our bars which are missing. We have already noted 2 bars are missing, G and H. Now when we are drawing the bars, even in terms of horizontal alignment, we should maintain the distance between the bars. So before drawing your bar, just check between any 2 bars, they have left half a centimeter space, or you can say 1 small square of space is left. So start drawing your bar for G also at that much distance. Also check what is the frequency for G, or what are the number of words recalled. It is 6. So what you need to do is draw a bar that reaches up to 6 on the y-axis. Again, I just want to remind what I'm doing in green is not to be shown on the paper, it is to explain to you. What I'm drawing with blue is what you have to draw. This is where 6 reaches on the y-axis, and this is where I want to cover G. So now I will just draw a bar or a rectangle that covers this much area. Okay, so in the paper, take your scale and draw neat lines. Your scale or ruler, take that. And using that with a pencil, just draw it very neatly. You can draw it with a pen also, but just be confident in that case. Okay, and here I will write G. You do not need to do any shading. And whether on top you want to write the figure, the frequency, that is up to you. You want to write it, otherwise you can skip it. Same way we need to draw a bar for H. H participant has remembered 8 words. So that means we need a bar which will reach up to 8 on the y-axis. So this is where 8 gets marked on the y-axis. So I'm going to draw a bar that reaches to that point. And again between G and H, I'm leaving half a centimeter of space. So this I will label as H. And if I want, I can just write on the top 8. So how I will be marked for this is 1 mark for writing number of words that label which I've given to the y-axis, 1 mark for giving the scaling, and 1 mark combined for giving G and H correctly. Okay, next question is very simple, very easy to score. In fact, the next 2 questions, both are calculation based. And we know in calculation based questions, we can easily get perfect marks. So the first one in that is asking us to calculate the mean score for participant recall for condition A after 5 seconds of interference. You should give your answer to 2 decimal places. So reading this question, what all is relevant from the syllabus which comes to mind? One is 2 decimal places means the rounding rules which are given in our syllabus, how we round off the numbers. We need to keep that in mind. Secondly, we have to read the question again very carefully. What students will do, they've clearly specified condition A. Still, they will confuse between the conditions just because they've drawn the bars from condition B. They might calculate the mean score for condition B instead. Or some of them will create even more confusion and combine both the conditions A and B, and cumulatively they will calculate the mean. It's been made very specific that we have to calculate the mean for condition A. So that is exactly what we need to do. Okay, when we calculate the mean, they're offering 2 marks for that. It cannot be as simple as we do everything on the calculator and just write the final answer. We're not going to get 2 marks for that. We need to show the working. Working does not mean each and every step, each and every addition. After all, they are allowing us to use a simple calculator. Again, if you're not sure about calculator rules, I don't want to cover it in this video. It becomes very lengthy. As of now, I can just say please refer to the syllabus. In that, calculator rules are given. Okay, so you're allowed to use a simple calculator. That means they don't want to show you to show every addition or every division how you're doing it. They don't want you to do it manually. But you do need to present what calculation you are using. It should not be you just write the final answer and the examiner does not know whether you know how to calculate the mean or you've just copied it from somewhere. Okay, so what I mean by this is, if you want, you can give a proper formula. So you can give that formula sum of x upon n. But more than that, what is important is to show what type of calculation you're doing. Formula is not compulsory. Showing how you're calculating is compulsory. Okay, firstly, coming back to the table, we want the mean only for condition A, which means only for these 8 numbers which are there from 10 till 10. Okay, so what we will do is first we will show the calculation. So we'll say mean score is equal to, okay, now what we do for the mean, as you know, on the top, on the numerator, we sum up all the numbers which are available, or we total all the numbers which are there. So right from 10 till the bottom 10, whichever numbers are there, we will show that we are adding them. So we will show it like this: 10 plus 11 plus 14 plus 9 plus 12 plus 13 plus 10 plus 10. In the denominator, we know we take the total number of scores which are there, or the serial number of participants which are there. Whichever way you want to think about it, we take n in the denominator. We don't need to show how we are counting n. It's a mental calculation. So that is coming to 8. Directly in the denominator, we can write 8. Now we use our calculator. Using the calculator, we can give the final answer. Still, I would recommend there's one more step we should show in between. That is, what is the total of the numerator that is coming. Okay, first let me add in the calculator all the numbers. The total for the numerator is coming to 89. So first let me write that in the numerator. Denominator stays as it is. So divide by 8. So for mean, I suggest show these two steps. One, how you are adding for the numerator, and then just show how you're dividing the total by the denominator. Then you're free to write the final answer. Okay, so firstly, let's do the division on the calculator. Okay, we need to round off, and they have specifically instructed that it should be to 2 decimal places. Now, the rule, if we remember, is that if the third digit place after the decimal is 5 or greater than 5, then we need to increase the digit in the second decimal place by 1. Okay, and that is the case over here. The result I'm getting is 11.125. The third digit place is equal to 5. That means I need to increase the number on the second digit place by 1. Don't need to show anything about this, but just show you know it by writing the final answer correct. So 11.13. That is my final mean score. Okay, so mean calculation is as simple as that. It seems to be lengthy when I am demonstrating because I have to instruct you a lot as I'm demonstrating. When you calculate it, it should barely take a minute at the most. Okay, now we have to calculate the median score for participant recall after 25 seconds of interference. That is condition B. Now here the whole trick in this question, as I've mentioned before also, is to read very carefully. They are going back and forth between condition B and A in different questions. So it is our duty not to confuse between the conditions that a particular question is asked for. So for median, they have asked condition B. That means we are going to focus on the last column. Okay, in terms of how we should answer a median question for 2 marks, again, we should definitely not directly give the answer. Anyways, for median calculation, we know we have to rank the data or we have to put it in ascending or descending order. Then only we get the median, otherwise we're going to be incorrect. If we just pick up the middle number which is there, that is wrong. So for our accuracy also, and to show in the paper that we know how to do the calculation correctly, we should be doing the ordering of the numbers first. Then we should show how we are calculating the median and then only write the final answer. So there are going to be 3 steps that we follow. Ordering, second is going to be calculation, and that also will show the basic step which we are not doing on the calculator. That step we will show, and then we will write the final answer. Okay, if this is confusing, when we write it, you will understand. First, let's go back to the question. Okay, we have to focus on the third column because they have asked us for condition B. So now we are just looking at that. Ignore condition A. Okay, again, there are 8 numbers here from 5 till 8. Our first job is to order them. I prefer ordering in ascending order, that is from the smallest number to the greatest number. It's up to you. You can do it the reverse also. Greatest number to smallest number, which is descending order. Okay, so now what I'm going to write is arranging the numbers in ascending order. You don't have to write the wording like this. Your wording can be your own. You can just write order, rank ordering, ascending order, anything like that. You don't want to write complete statements. It's not compulsory, though it's better to do that. Just give an idea to the examiner what you're doing. Don't just directly start sorting out the numbers. Let the examiner understand what is happening. Be very clear and as explicit as you can be. Okay, so now if I put those number in order, first of all, the smallest number I can see is 4. So 4 goes first. Following that, we have 5. 5 is greater than 4. Then we have 6. 6 is greater than 5. Now 6 is recurring. I can see it 3 times on that table. I have to write it 3 times. This is where students make a mistake in calculating the median. They will not write the correct number of times that it is recurring. So if it's recurring, like it's occurring thrice, they would just write it once or twice in a haste. Never be in a haste. There's nothing to worry about. Write slowly and carefully. Calculate it better. That is rather better than being in a haste and getting everything wrong. Next number which is greater than 6 is 7. Then there's 8. 8 is occurring twice. So I need to write it twice. Now we have counted first, so we know there are 8 participants. That means getting the median is not going to be straightforward. This is median for even number. This is not median for odd number. So that means we will have to do the formula wise. What we'll have to do is n plus 1 upon 2 and n plus 1 plus 1 upon 2. Like, the formula is little complex. Again, like I said, the formula we don't need to show over here. So what we can do is directly we can show the base calculation, how we are getting the median. Okay, just to explain to you, I'm showing certain things. We know median is the middlemost value. Now here there's not a single middle post position that I can pick up that and say, okay, that is the median. There are 2 positions in the middle. One is the 4th position. Whatever I'm writing in green is just for your understanding. One is the 5th position, 6. So what I have to do is, because there are 2 numbers in the middle position, since there are 2 middle positions, I have to take an average of these numbers. That will be the median. So that is what I need to calculate and show how I'm getting the average of these numbers. So what I will write is median is equal to 6 plus 6 upon 2. That is equal to 12 upon 2. That is equal to 6. That 6 I will write over here. So this much I will show in terms of working in the paper. We do not even have to use the calculator. In case if you're doing the division on the calculator or something, we don't need to show that. Okay, so this is ideally how we should answer the median question. Let's look at the next question. It's a ratio question. Samad calculated the ratio of words recalled in each condition for his participants and displayed in table 2. This is for each condition. So we have for A and B. So in A we can see, again they have given the same numbers, that is how many words they recalled in condition A. Same thing for B. Again they have given how many words were recalled. Ratio they have given in the last column. So 2 is to 1, 11 is to 6. Again, just quickly for your understanding, I'm showing, you should know it at this point, how we get a ratio. For example, 10 and 5 is this. So 10 is to 5. When we take the least common multiple in both, it comes down to 2 is to 1. Same way, 11 is to 6. There's no common multiple, so it remains as 11 is to 6. So this calculation Samad has already done. The ratio he's calculated. Now what they want us to do is calculate the ratio of the words for the remaining participant. Remaining participant is H, because only the cell for H is blank over here in the table. And only 1 mark question this is. Still we should show it properly, be it for 1 or 2 marks. We should not directly write the answer. We should give an idea of how we are doing it, so that the examiner knows that we know how to do the working and we are not just copying from something. Okay, I just showed just now for the remaining participants how Samad must have got the ratio. Same logic applies here. Here for condition A for H, the number of words is 10. And for condition B, it is 8. So that means it will be 10 is to 8. But we can't stop at that, because we have to come down to the least form of the ratio. That is, we have to come down by dividing either end of the ratio by the least common multiple. So that is what we need to do. Okay, so what we can do in terms of what we have to show in the paper is, first we will just show 10 is to 8. So that we can just write here to indicate that we know which ratio we are simplifying. Then we will show which is that common factor or that common multiple that we are using to simplify the ratio. So here, if we consider 10 and 8, again I don't want to go into too much discussion, but how you get an LCM for any ratio is, think of all the possible divisors or factors which are there for 10. So we know there is 5, 2, 1, of course, 10 itself, 1, that will always be there. Okay, for 8, the divisors are 4, 2, again 1, 8 itself. What is common to both is 2. So we can just show that. So we can show 10 is to 8, and then we can write something like using common factor or using LCM, something like that you can mention and write. Show 10 divided by 2 is to 8 divided by 2. And then that is how you are simplifying. That becomes clear to the examiner. Okay, so 10 divided by 2, as we know, is 5, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. So finally we can write 5 is to 4. That is the final answer for the ratio. Okay, also always make sure that the final answer you're writing in the correct slot. Don't write it in the blank area. By chance, if by mistake while calculating you've written here, no problem, but then just write it again where the final slot is there, because after all the marking will be done over there. Okay, so very simple calculation questions, like I said, very easy to score on them, and that completes scenario 1. Let us move towards the next separate scenario 2, and the very good thing is they leave a blank page in middle, so that keeps us focused that one scenario is over and we are moving to the next, so we have very good clarity. Okay, let's come to scenario 2. Milgram investigated obedience to an authority figure. In his original study, he wore an official laboratory coat as a uniform. He told the participants to give a 450-volt electric shock to a fake learner each time they answered the question wrong. The learner and participants were not in the same room. The electric shocks were not actually real. Figure 1 shows the results from 4 different studies conducted by Milgram, including his original study. Always, for a chart, we should read the title first. And don't be in a haste. It is always worth giving the time it takes to read these details to prevent making mistakes later. Those mistakes are very expensive because you lose marks. Giving time here is not expensive, it is beneficial. Okay, so a bar chart to show the percentage of participants giving a 450-volt shock to learners in Milgram's variation studies. Then we should always read the x-axis. The x-axis label reads original study and situational variations of the original study. So each bar is representing either the original study or some variation of it. So one variation is that participant was in the room with the learner, which we saw was not the case in the original study. Another bar is representing an authority figure with no uniform, which we saw in the original study. The authority figure was wearing a laboratory coat. So in this variation of the study, he wasn't wearing it. And the last bar is showing 2 other participants refused to shock. So in this study, there was no arrangement for other participants not providing the shock. But here, the participant was able to see 2 other participants who were refusing to give the shock. Next, for any chart, we should read the y-axis. Y-axis is depicting percentage of participants giving 450-volt shock to the learners. And this has been scaled, of course, since it's percentage, the usual scale, 10% on every centimeter of the graph has been represented. So we go from 0 to 100. Before we proceed, it's also always good to take a rough idea, because we know there will be something asked relating to the results or conclusion. Practicing so many answers of this type, we have an idea of what is going to come ahead. So what we should do is just take a good glance at what the different bars are showing, and then we should attempt the questions. Okay, so for the original study, we can see the percentage of participants who gave that ultimate shock of 450 volts is just a little more than 60. So roughly something like 65%. In the variant in which the participant is in the same room as the learner. So perhaps that discourages him from giving too many shocks because he can see the plight of the learner. So the number of participants giving that 450-volt shock really comes down to 40%. In yet another variant in which the participant is confronted by an authority figure who's not wearing a uniform, the percentage comes down to 20. So again, perhaps that is what discourages him from being obedient, that the authority figure does not look like an authority figure. And then finally, in that variation in which there are two other participants who refuse to shock, perhaps that gives him some modeling effect, that brings down his chances of giving a shock to sharply to 10%. Okay, like I said, just to get an estimate of what is happening and a rough picture of what has been shown through the different variants, we can always think like this, though it's not compulsory. Then we can come to the question asked. Describe using the data in figure 1 the results for wearing and not wearing a uniform on levels of obedience. The key thing in this type of question is to see, are they asking for results or conclusion. Results mean we have to give data, and conclusion would mean we have to give interpretation of results. That means we wouldn't have to give data as such, or we wouldn't have to give numbers of such. Rather, we would have to interpret some number or interpret some result and in words explain what that result is indicating. Right now, because they have asked for results, we will focus on data. Okay, so there are a number of possibilities because so many bars are there. There are so many results that we can give. Right now, the one I would like to take is the bar on directly on authority figure not wearing a uniform. And when they say authority wearing and not wearing a uniform, wearing is in the original study. So if you've read the question carefully, then only you'll know that if directly you start searching on the x-axis, where is the bar for authority figure wearing the uniform, you won't get it. So that's why you have to know in the original study is where he was wearing the uniform. We had marked it right at the beginning. He wore laboratory coat as a uniform. So this one. Okay, as compared to that, we have to see authority figure with no uniform. So that is the third bar from the left. Okay, now before we write anything, first we should check in our own mind what is the percentage which is being reflected. So for the original study, 65%, it's very obvious. It's rough, of course. From the bar, we don't come to know very precisely. So we can say approximately or roughly 65%. Authority figure not wearing a uniform, it's roughly 20%. In fact, here it's pretty exact, so we can say 20%. Okay, so it's like 65% and 20%. And that is what we need to point out. It's as simple as that. They're checking our reading of the numbers or reading of the data. Because, like I said, otherwise they would have asked us for conclusion. So, if they wanted us to say something like that when the authority figure is wearing the uniform, then obedience rates are much higher than when he's not wearing. That is, they wanted us to say like this without numbers, just in wording. They would have asked for conclusion, but they have asked for result. So, this is only what we have to write. When there are two results, like two numbers are there, 65%, 20%, aim for keeping two separate sentences pointing out to each of these. That's always better, much easier for the examiner to read, and it shows to him that you have covered whatever is required in the answer. You have not left out anything. Okay. So, how we should put it neatly into words is we can say for wearing a uniform, the level of obedience was approximately 65%. For not wearing a uniform, the level of obedience was 20%. So I have simply taken the wording from the question itself. Level of obedience, because here it's written level of obedience. Wearing a uniform, because here it's written wearing. Don't put too many words of your own, because if you do it correctly, it's fine. Many students don't do it correctly, so the meaning is lost, what they are trying to indicate. So try to stick to the wording in the question. Scoring is going to be simple for this type of answer. 1 mark for 65%, 1 mark for 20%. Okay, let's come to answer 2b. It could be claimed that how close a person is to a learner will impact whether or not they would obey instructions to harm the learner. This is something that has not been manipulated in any of the variants of the study. So they're telling us this is one more possibility, like a future variation could do this. Give one reason why the data in figure 1 could support this claim. Okay, so this can be done in a future variation. They can keep on manipulating the closeness. So they can put the learner and the teacher or the participant at different distances from each other. Exactly this has not been done, but something close to this has been done in that condition in which, so in that variation in which participants are in the same room with the learner. So in the original study, we marked that they are in a different room from the learner. That means they are at a distance. And participant being in the same room as the learner means that they are closer to each other than in the original study. So that can give us an idea of what they're asking us about over here. Again, if you've read the question carefully, we will be able to understand what has been asked over here. If we haven't read it only correctly, we'll get confused because when we start hunting the bars, we don't understand. None of the bars directly uses the word closeness or proximity. One of the bars is just talking about being in the same room. So that's why reading is very important. Okay, now what they want us to do is give only one reason why the data could support this claim. Okay, again, when they talk about data, like I said, there are certain keywords. Data, result means we have to give numbers. If you give without numbers, you're very unlikely to score in this answer. It's not just a conclusion. So make sure you give the number and which numbers you have to give. The original study one also means again 65%, and the variation study one also means again you have to give about I'm sorry, not the 20%, this 40%, because we're talking about in which he's in the same room with the learner. Now, because it's for 1 mark, we won't write two separate sentences, and after all, they're asking us for a comparative result. They don't want two separate sentences. It's not like they have rolled two results into one question. They want one common result which will show a comparison of the two conditions. Okay, so let's see how we can put this. So, what we can write is when the learner and the participant were in the same room, level of obedience declined to 40% from 65%. That's all we need to write here because it's just for 1 mark. But what is important is to mention both 40% and 65%. That shows the comparison. If you just mention went to 40% from what, that is an incomplete answer. So make sure you mention both the results. So that is about question 2. Now coming to question 3. Dimma gathered data about the age that adults had been diagnosed with unipolar depression. The result are shown in table 3. Table 3, there's no title as such, so it's just the results for the study. So we'll see the columns. First column is serial number of participants from A to H. Second column is age when diagnosed with unipolar depression, ranging from 21 to 28 on the table as such, not the exact range. They want us to calculate the mode for the data. Okay, mode question is for 1 mark. The reason being there's not much calculation to show in the mode. See, one possibility, because mode is based on counting, it is not based on calculation. One possibility you can show something like for the mode, you can list out all the scores. 21 means all the unique scores you can list out 21, 24, 28, 29. And you can keep writing the frequency on the right side. So 21 is occurring thrice, 24 is occurring once, 27 is occurring once, 28 is occurring twice, and 29 is occurring once. So you can do this whole calculation and show. But like I said, it's counting based, it's not calculation. Like this is also not calculation, it's just counting the frequencies. That is why you're not really required to show anything in the paper when it comes to mode. You can directly write the answer. So this is the way we come to the correct answer, by seeing which number has the highest frequency. This work can be done mentally, and there in the answer we can just write directly mode 21. That's all. Okay, let's move to the next question. This is question 4, a separate question again. Inder investigated accuracy of recall, and figure 2 shows data gathered in Inder's investigation. On the x-axis, we have rehearsal time in minutes, which is ranging from 2 to 12. And on the y-axis, we have accuracy of story recalled out of 8, ranging from 1 to 8. I'm sorry, 0 to 8. They have shown 9, but of course that's not within the range of the study. Okay, now before we progress, like I always say, excuse me, we should just make a mental estimate of what is happening. So what we are seeing is, before we read any of the questions, as the rehearsal time is increasing, definitely there is an increase in the accuracy of recall. So that linear trend is there, but it's not always linear. Sometimes it becomes stable or constant in between. So for example, if a person is rehearsing from 2 to 6 minutes, there is a sharp rise in recall, but then it flattens or it stables out up to 9 minutes. Then again, if he recalls for more than 9 minutes, it increases a little, and then again it stables out up to 12 minutes, like that. But overall it's an increasing trend, because if we just see the first point and the last point, there is an increase between that, it's not flat. So that much we can just note for our understanding. Also, we note that on the x-axis there is a mistake in noting the time. So what they've done is 2, 4, 8, 7, 9. Again they've repeated 9 instead of 9. It should have been something like 10 should have been shifted on the left. Here we would have 11 and there 12. Right now I'm ignoring that. If it's relevant, we'll come back to it. Okay. Here the Tengas explain one conclusion that can be reached from Inder's results. So this is a good thing. We get to see the difference between a result and a conclusion question. Result question, like I have mentioned, it has to include data. It has to include numbers. Conclusion question does not have to include numbers. It has to be rather an interpretation of numerical results in words. So here, for our understanding, we have noted numbers that gives us an understanding of what is happening in the scenario. But in reporting or in writing the answer, we are not going to use those numbers. First of all, when we see this diagram, of course, we have to make use of knowledge that we have gained in the course. So when we look at the diagram only, the first thing that should click in our mind is that it is a scatter diagram. And scatter diagram is always for correlation. So scatter graph, scatter bar, whatever you call it, it is for correlation. That means the interpretation should be done on basis of correlation. We should talk about the correlation of the variable represented on x and the variable represented on y. Okay, so some use we are making of the diagram here and the results here to understand, but of course first beginning point has to be what we have learned in the syllabus, and what we have learned is correlation. So now, keeping in mind that this is a correlation diagram, we look out for the trend of correlation, which I've already explained. There is a rising line from left to right, which always indicates positive correlation. So it is a positive correlation. But if we just state it's a positive correlation, the marks allotted are 2. So definitely we are not scoring just for stating that it's a positive correlation. That will just give us 1 mark. Also, they want a conclusion of this particular diagram. So if I just say positive correlation, again it falls in the generic category, which I had explained before. It's not a specific answer. There's no reference to the scenario given. So further, after saying that it's a positive correlation, I will interpret what I mean by a positive correlation with respect to the variables that are given in this diagram. Let's see how to write this answer. One conclusion is that Ender's results are depicting a positive correlation. That is, greater the rehearsal time, greater is the accuracy of story recall. In correlation questions, we always name the variables, and from wherever I got the names of the variables exactly in the question. Don't modify the name of the variables. So, rehearsal time is what is written, so I've taken rehearsal time. Accuracy of story recall, so I've just picked it up from there. In a bid to show that you have understood really well, don't put too much input of your own. Understanding well means that there is clarity in your expression. And when you use too much wording of your own when it's not necessary, that muddles up the answer. Let's come to question 5. First, they've asked us a general question, so it's AO1 type of descriptive question because there's no scenario to which this is related. Define what is meant by quantitative data. Okay, so in general, whatever we have understood, whatever we have learned from the textbook, we can write. Quantitative data, we know it's the one which is in numbers, so it's numerical data. So we can write quantitative data. Okay, either we can write it as data in numbers, or we can say is refers to numerical data that can be used for statistical analysis. As I said, whichever you have learned definition from your textbook or from the revision guide by Professor Ali Abbas, whichever one you're learning, just write it properly. And it's very important to learn all the definitions because, like we can see here, any of them come in the paper. Next is again a straightforward question, calculation, very simple, range. Question 6. Set of data gathered by researcher in developmental psychology has the following set of scores: 18 and it goes up to 19. Calculate the range for this data. It's just for 1 mark. Still, I would suggest, because here there is calculation involved, it's not just a matter of counting. So we should just show the calculation. Okay, range. Now, just to remember, first of all, to calculate range, we have to locate the highest number or the number with the maximum value in the data set. So, the highest value number in this data set, if I just scan through all the numbers, is 47. The one with the lowest value in this data set, again, if I just scan, the least value is of the number 11. There's nothing that's lower than 11 or greater than 47. To calculate range, the simple formula is xh minus xl. But again, we don't need to show that formula, so we can directly write range is equal to 47 minus 11. And then we can write the final answer 36 in the correct space. If you want, of course, you are having your calculator. On that, you can perform the subtraction and then write the final answer. Okay, coming to question 7. Misha wants to conduct a study about conformity. The study will use the population of males and females aged between 21 years and 49 years old in his local town. He decides to use stratified sampling. Describe how Misha would use stratified sampling. So it's essential, first of all, to know the general meaning of stratified sampling. It is group wise sampling or stratum wise sampling which occurs. That means we decide on which groups we want from the population to be represented into the sample. Then we decide on some ratio of representation or a percentage from each group, how many participants we would want in terms of percentage or ratio, what proportion or what percentage of participants from each group. and then accordingly we make a selection. So the same thing we have to apply to Misha's scenario. I know I'm repeating this, but it's very important to repeat because this is where students lose marks. So I want to remind you, they would not give you a scenario unless they want you to refer to the scenario. They could have asked you straightforward questions. What is meant by stratified sampling? The reason they are giving you a scenario is because you have to use wording from the scenario, make your answer relevant to the scenario, and answer accordingly. So that is what we are going to do over here. We are not just going to say what is stratified sampling or how it is done generally. We are going to say with respect to Misha's scenario how stratified sampling would be done by him or her. Okay, so just as I mentioned, stratified sampling is firstly about identifying groups. Looking at Misha's scenario, he wants to represent, or she, I'm not sure, I guess it would be she wants to represent males and females. That means gender is one grouping that she's looking out for, and she wants to represent 21 years old and 49 years old. That means age is another group that she wants to look out for. So in our answer, to make it specific and to use wording from the scenario, we will talk about age and gender. When it comes to ratio, there is no mention of what ratio Misha is looking out for. When there is no mention of something but it is important to the definition that is there, then we can just make a mention of it with how much ever context is available. Then there's not too much that we can write, and we are not at fault for it because it is just not mentioned in the question. Okay, let's see how to write this answer now. We can write Misha can identify the groups that she wants to represent in her sample, namely age and gender. Then she can identify the proportion of each subgroup within these groups, such as males and females within gender, and select from the population accordingly. Okay, let us move on to the next question. Question 8. Iron investigates the onset of conservation of volume in children. He uses an equal number of children aged 4, 5, 6, and 7 years old. In the diagram, we can see the typical Piagetian conservation type of task. So, just again for our own mental estimate, we should just see what the figure is about. It shows three cups, like they've mentioned here. In the first or the left part of the diagram, we see that water is being transformed, means it's in the process of being transformed or shifted from a stout jar B, which is there, to a tall jar C. Cup. So from a stout cup B to a tall cup C. And in the right side of the diagram, we can see that the shifting or transformation is complete. The water has been shifted from cup B to cup C. Okay, let's read further. Cups A and B are the same shape with the same volume of liquid. We can see that. So we can see A and B in either diagram. It's very apparent that the shape is the same. Both are short and stout. He pours water from cup B into cup C, which is a different shape. C, we can see in both the diagrams, it's tall and slender compared to cups A and B. He asks the children whether cup A or cup C has more water in it. So what the children of these different age groups, four different age groups, have to answer is, which of the cups is having more water, A or C? Ian records the number of errors made by the children. Ian writes a hypothesis for his study which includes a dependent variable. Name the dependent variable for Ian's study. Very easy answer to score. And for dependent variable, always the question that we ask is, what is the researcher measuring in this study? And we get the answer. That is the dependent variable. Here it's written as clearly as he measures or he records the number of errors. That means number of errors is the dependent variable. So all we have to write is the dependent variable is the number of errors. We need not elaborate. We need not indicate why we are saying it's the number of errors, because it's just for 1 mark. That is why considering the command term and the marks allocated is so important, because when we don't write unnecessarily and we don't waste time, very precious time which is required to answer other questions. Name is literally stating. There's no need for an explanation. And 1 mark, of course, we are not going to get awarded anything more than one, so why should we explain? Coming to the next page, it's a continuation of Iron's question. The results for Iron's investigation are shown in the table. So in the table, which is about results, we can see the first column is the age of the children. We had already seen in the question. It was ranging from 4 to 7. On the right column, we have total number of errors made by the children ranging from 54 to 338. They want us to calculate the percentage of errors made by the 6-year children. Okay, very simple question. I'll just have to open my calculator. Just give me a minute. Okay, so percentage of errors. When it comes to the percentage of anything, we know percentage formula as such. Like I've said, we don't need to write the formulas, but in our mind it should come. Percentage is always the number of whatever we are referring to, the category in that, how many ever number of something is there, which we represent as a small n that comes on the numerator. It always has to be divided by the total number of something, and then this result which comes after division is what is multiplied by 100. So percentage is always the specific total upon the overall total into 100. I'm just trying to put it simply without using mathematical jargon. Okay, now in this case, if we want to know what is our small n or what is the specific total that we are looking for, we have to read the question very carefully. They have said 6-year-old children. Again, students will make a haste and they won't note which is the exact category being asked for, and most of them will just pick up the first number which is there. So we shouldn't do that. Instead of that, since they've mentioned 6, we should look at the row for 6. There the number is 104. That means on the numerator we want 104. Now the question is, what is that grand total or the overall total that we are talking about? Whatever errors 6 years old are making, it's a part of the total errors which are there. So that means we need to add up whatever is there in these 4 rows. All these 4 numbers we have to add up, get a grand total or the capital N which is there. That number we'll have to divide 104 by, and then the result we will multiply by 100 to get the percentage. It's for 2 marks. In terms of what exactly we have to show in calculation, we should show how we are calculating. So that first step should always be there. The substitution into the formula, we don't need to write the formula, but we can show the substitution which we are doing. So how I would put it is, percentage of errors Okay, now in the numerator we have 104. That I can write directly. I don't need to explain why or from where I got 104. The denominator I can leave blank because right now I don't know what is the denominator, and multiply by 100. So I'm just leaving a space for the denominator. I'll fill it very soon. Now I would suggest, though it's not compulsory, we should just show how we are getting the denominator or how we are getting the total number of children. That is very helpful. So how we are getting the total number of errors? So what we can show is somewhere over here, total number of errors, and just show the addition like we are done in case of mean. So 338 plus 180 plus 104 plus 54, we can just show it like this and do it on the calculator and give the total bill. So I'm just adding up. So this is coming to 676, and then I can write it over here on the left side. Now I don't need to show any further calculation, means in my recommendation, though it's not compulsory, just show the formula which I've shown on the left and just show how you're getting the denominator for any percentage question. Okay, now very important to show on the calculator also. I don't know how students make some mistake. They do multiplication before addition or something like that. I'm sorry, they do multiplication before division or something like that. So just see step by step how I'm doing it on the calculator also. First to 104 divided by 676. You get a number. Press the equal to sign before doing anything further. Press equal to, then multiply it by 100. So you see it comes to 15.384 something something. Now we should round it off. To where we want to round it off is optional. 1 decimal, 2 decimal. In fact, even if we don't put any decimal place, even that is marked as correct. Though I would not recommend that. I would recommend 2 decimal places. So what we are getting on the calculator is something like 15.384 something. The third digit after the decimal place is less than 5. So I can retain 8 or the second decimal place as it is. So how I would write the final answer is 15.38%. Still, I would like to show other possibilities if you want to answer in another way. Supposing you want to take it only till 1 decimal place. In that case, the rule is look at what is there in the second decimal place. It is greater than 5, add 1. So if you wanted to report it to 1 decimal place, you would have to write 15.4%. 15.3 would be incorrect. Follow the rules of rounding. And if you want to round very crudely, then 15% would be right because 1 decimal place is 4, which is less than 5. So it won't increase to 16%, it will remain at 15%. Okay, next they've asked us, Ein could have used a single or double blind technique in this study. Give one reason why Ein might use double blind in this study. And this is just for 1 mark. Generally, what is double blind we know, the researcher and the participants are both unaware of which participant is being given which treatment in the study. Now, this is a general answer. If it was for 2 marks, first I would have explained this, then I would have related it to Ein's study. But it's just for 1 mark. So, noting the marks is very important. And the command term is give, not explain. So, I don't need to write in general what is double blind. Directly why Ein should have used double blind, I will say that. So, just for my understanding to remember the concept, in my mind, I'll remember generally what is double blind, but I will not write it in the paper. Let me go back to Ein's scenario. I just need to look at it again to be able to answer. Okay, now why he should have used double blind? Because if he would have used double blind, in that case, what would happen? The researcher would not know that there is certain expectation, like 4 years old should not be able to conserve, but 5 years old should also not be able to. So those type of things, how it's related to Piaget's theory, that what age of these children should not be able to conserve and which should be able to conserve. Those type of expectations would have not been there in the researcher's mind. Now, why I'm talking from researcher's point of view when it's double blind? Why am I not talking about participants' point of view? Because in double blind, though it is double blind, more important is researcher's blinding. That's why I'm talking about in this sense. Okay, so why Ein should have used a double blind is because if the researchers would have conveyed to them that they are of a certain age group and that is why they should be able to conserve or not, then picking up the researcher's body language, the children would have tried harder on the task, or they would have not tried so much on the task, which would have affected their performance. Again, like I said, it's just for 1 mark. We can't go into this much detail also, how much I've explained. I've just explained for your understanding. What we have to say simply is that researchers would not be able to convey to the children how they should perform, and thus children would not behave unrealistically, or children would not behave in different ways than they should. That is all we have to write, just because of the way the marks are allotted. Okay, so we will keep it relevant. We will talk about children, we'll talk about iron, because after all we have to refer to the scenario, but given the constraint of 1 mark, we won't go into too many details. Okay, so what we'll write is iron should use double blind to prevent researchers' expectations of performance from changing children's performance in the study. Okay, so that's unfortunately all we can write, because it's just been asked for one single mark. Let's look at the next question 9. Ash conducted an experiment to investigate whether social pressure from a majority group could affect conformity rate of others. Ash sampled 50 male students to participate in a vision test using a line judgment task, which is shown in the figure. Okay, so just we'll quickly look at the figure. There are two photographs. On the left side, we see a target line. On the right side, we see three lines A, B, and C. Okay, 7 confederates to the study had already been told to give the same response, some accurate and some inaccurate. Ash then put a participant in a room with these 7 confederates. Each person in the room had to say which line, A, B, or C, was most like the target line. The accurate answer was always obvious. The participant always gave their response last. The number of times that each participant conformed to the majority view when it was incorrect was recorded by Ash. Evaluate the use of laboratory experiments to test human behavior. This is a 12 marker. Students fear the 12 marker. I don't know why. It is the easiest to score and easiest to be prepared for. I won't deny that the scenario which is given is unpredictable. But the format is so explicit in how you have to answer. It's so straightforward that there should be no problem when it comes to writing the answer. It is so organized. You just have to keep on following the format. Okay, so here what is there? First, I'll just give a general overview of how you're supposed to answer a 12 marker. Then we'll come to the specifics of answering this particular question. So we'll use it as an example to see exactly what we do while answering. Okay, for any 12 marker, you have to answer in terms of three criteria. Assessment objective 1, which is description. Assessment objective 2, which is application. And assessment objective 3, which is evaluation. I will not go into too many details. Like I had mentioned earlier, students want precise videos. So I'm just giving a rough idea of what I mean by this. Description means answering a question as per knowledge which is gained from the textbook without evaluating it, without pointing out strengths and weaknesses, that is, and without applying it to the given scenario. So it is pure knowledge that we are presenting, which is relevant to the question asked, without reference, without evaluation. Like I said, I'm just going to be brief. So if there's something you do not understand, I will not be able to cover in this video. This is not meant for a detailed explanation of 9 and 12 markers. Okay, application means using wording from the scenario and literally applying knowledge to that scenario. So whatever we have written in AO1, that knowledge only now we have to use wording from the scenario and point out where in that scenario that knowledge is becoming relevant. So it is applying knowledge to a given scenario. And then there is evaluation. Evaluation means strengths and weaknesses. I don't know how students confuse evaluation and application. So whenever you see evaluation, just keep in mind strengths and weaknesses. That means, of course, whatever is relevant, whatever is being discussed. For that only we have to point out the strengths and weaknesses. And we will refer to the scenario in this case also. The only thing is we are not referring description. We are not trying to apply the knowledge to the scenario. What we are trying to apply to the scenario is an evaluation of the strengths and weaknesses. That is what we are going to do. So these three criteria have to be covered. The best organization or best form of answering would be to take AO1 in the first paragraph, to take AO2 in the second paragraph, and to take AO3 in the third paragraph. Which means that to be able to keep track of our own answer also, if we follow this format, we won't miss out on anything because we are keeping three separate paragraphs. At the same time, for the examiner also, it becomes very explicit that we have covered all the three criteria. If we write a muddled up answer, that is in the sense we've jumbled it all. Somewhere we've covered AO1, then AO2. We keep on moving back and forth between these three types of points: description, application, and evaluation. If we do that, we keep on moving through these. In that case, it becomes very difficult for the examiner to make out and to assure that we have covered everything. So we should not do that. We should be highly organized. If we see the descriptive table criteria for how they mark these answers, we'll see organization is a very important part of it. So why not just follow this very simple format? Okay, I won't discuss more about this. Now I'm coming back to the scenario. What we should do before answering a 9 marker or a 12 marker is, in our mind, we should jot down some points. What are we going to cover under AO1, what under AO2, and what under AO3? That helps because otherwise, halfway we start writing something and we get totally lost. We don't know what to write ahead. So let's be very clear in our mind what we want to cover. That is better than getting stuck or better than making a lot of cancellations and then reconsidering and writing points, which makes it very unclear and even messy for the examiner to read through. Okay, what they've asked us is laboratory experiment. I'm sorry, I think it was ahead. Laboratory experiment. So that's the first keyword. And what they want to know, of course, evaluation. This question is, the wording is always evaluation, and it's going to be on one of the research methods only for 12 marker. So it's going to be either on experiment, interview, case study, questionnaire, observation, correlation. So here they've given laboratory experiment for evaluation. So first in our mind, in AO1, generally, what are the strengths and weaknesses of laboratory experiment? What knowledge we have gained from the textbook or from whichever guide we are referring to about what are the strengths and weaknesses of laboratory experiment. First, we should jot down that. So one strength, as we know, for laboratory experiment is the control that we get. Lot of extraneous variables are controlled, which makes the results very reliable. So that is definitely one strength we can discuss. Another strength is, of course, there's a lot of standardization, which makes results very reliable and amenable to replication very easily. So that should be there. Problems with laboratory experiment, one thing, ecological validity tends to be very poor. That's the most obvious weakness which is there, just lacks mundane realism, which makes ecological validity very less. And also, it generally makes use of quantitative data. It lacks detail in results. It lacks qualitative data. Now, my suggestion before we move to AO2, and which is why it's necessary to write the points for AO1 in our mind, is this only, that what will happen is, supposing we know these are the general strengths and weaknesses, and of course we will be able to apply in the scenario. What if we are not able to explain one of these points when it comes to the scenario? We're getting confused. For example, I've written that there are controls, But in the scenario, I'm confused. I'm not able to identify any control. I'm not able to think of any control that should have been maintained. Then what? So, then I should think of another strength that I can give. One rule of thumb is, because it's a 12 marker, 4 marks are being allotted to each assessment objective. So, definitely we should have 4 points under AO1, and because it's to maintain balance between strengths and weaknesses, we should aim for 2 strengths and 2 weaknesses. That is the reason I've jotted it down this way. So now, when I have written these strengths and weaknesses, more possibilities are there. Like, other strengths of laboratory experiment include informed consent is there. If we talk about in terms of ethics, so participants know that they are part of an experiment. Another strength that comes to my mind is quantitative data is collected, so results tend to be very objective. They can be easily analyzed in the sense statistical techniques are possible and direct comparisons can be made across conditions. So this is what these are most trends that we could have covered. In case the ones that we have jotted down in our mental map is what we are not able to relate to the study, then we should substitute them with other strengths that we will be better able to explain with reference to the scenario. Same thing goes for weaknesses. Other weaknesses are also possible in laboratory experiments. One weakness that comes to my mind is the possibility of demand characteristics, because participants know that they are in a study, so to some extent they will always be conscious and their behavior will be unnatural to that extent. They might deliberately try to put more effort, which makes their results less representative. Other possibilities are sample issues, standardization issues. If in some particular experiment there is lack of standardization, so again, if the given weaknesses are something we cannot cover, we can aim for those other weaknesses. Right now what I have written down, I will be able to cover it, so I'm continuing with those only. I have made a point about control. Again, for good organization, write your AO2 in correspondence with what you have written in AO1. Don't shuffle the order of the points. You've taken control as a strength first. In your AO2 paragraph, talk about control before talking about anything else. Let the examiner have a very good flow of the answer. One after the other, what he is expecting, let those points only come in front of him. Okay, so in terms of control, we can see that the line task which is given is very controlled, because the confederates have been trained in advance how they have to act in this task. The participant's turn is always kept last, so that he comes under the pressure of whatever the confederates are reporting, so that conformity pressure is made over the participant. So these type of controls are increasing validity. So I'm able to point out some controls in this study. If right now the content of the points is not very clear to you, don't worry. I'm going to write the full answer and show you. Right now, I'm more interested in giving you the idea of how we are structuring, how we are deciding on the points. So just see to understanding that for now. Standardization is very well done in this study, because we can see all the steps are very fixed. Like, in the sense, the number of confederates that are there, the turn of the participant always comes in a specific turn, that is the last turn. The recording of the time which is being done, that is that being done in a very standardized way. Every time the participant is incorrect, that time a recording is being made, so the number of errors are being counted. All this is very standardized and very specified, so any researcher wants to replicate can replicate this study, perform it himself, and check whether he gets consistent results like the one by Ash or not. So that increases reliability. Then I've taken a weakness, which is the lack of ecological validity. In this study, conformity is being measured in terms of response to a line task. Line task is not something that is done in everyday life. Everyday conformity scenarios are more about following rules, such as, will I follow the rules in a library? Will I keep quiet in the library, or will I start talking? So that those are more realistic scenarios. This type of a scenario, whatever results we get, might not apply to those type of real conformity scenarios which are there. Also, it lacks details, in the sense that in terms of quantitative data, They've just counted the number of times participant is incorrect or number of times he's conforming to the confederates who are there. That does not give us any context. That does not give us details. Why is the participant conforming? Is it that he's really feeling pressure? That is why he's conforming? Has he become doubtful about his own answer? Is he scared that the Confederates will retaliate against him or make fun of him if he does not give the correct answer? What is the reason that he's not giving the correct answer? Those details we are not coming to know because there is no qualitative data that is collected. So these things we need to mention. Now coming to AO3. Again, for each of these objectives which are there, maintain that rule of 4 points. And it's not difficult. Once your AO1 has become about 4 points, very naturally AO2 and AO3 will also have 4 points because we're just going by the flow or we're just going by the correspondence which should be there. Okay, so in AO3, we have mentioned what are the possibilities already in AO1 and 2, what problems are there, but exactly why is it proving to be a strength or why is it proving to be a weakness? That is what we need to explain in AO3. So we need to kind of finish the points that we have made in AO1 and AO3. I'm sorry, AO2. We need to finish those points. We need to indicate directly how they're answering the question of evaluation. Okay, so one point we have made about is control, and we have said that confederates help to give control, whatever examples we are giving. That increases validity. Which validity? Internal validity. That gives us more credibility or more confidence in our results. That is what we need to mention in EO3. Another thing is we have mentioned standardization. And we've said anybody can replicate the study. Why is that important? Because that will give us a consistency of results. The results will become trustworthy because of it. Of course, we need to make it more explicit, which I'll do while writing. So we will have more consistency in the results and we'll be sure that indeed conformity does result in greater amount of errors made while answering. Also, we are seeing low ecological validity is there. So for that, we have said that the task is very artificial. Why is that a problem? Because the results will not apply to other conformity situations which are there. That is why it is a weakness. Finally, there's lack of qualitative data. We are not coming to know the context. Why is that important? Because the scope of findings becomes very limited. There is a lot more we could have understood conformity in depth had we interviewed the participants or observed them in some way. But since we haven't done that, we are just briefly touching on the topic of conformity, but we are not able to elaborate upon it. So these are the points that we need to cover. This is the rough idea in our mind what all we have to cover. Now, when we are writing the proper answer, you'll get to see the organization while actually writing, and you'll be able to see how we have to write a very explicit and a very direct answer. Again, why students lose marks mainly is because they just keep on throwing out textbook content into the answer. There's no AO2 and AO3 at all. And AO3 also, they'll just give general strengths and weaknesses without at all applying it to the scenario which is given. So now we'll see how we relate things and write in the answer. Okay, so now I'll write a model answer based on the outline that I have just created. Before I forget, one more question that comes is for AO1, do we need to define laboratory experiments? Do we need to give general features of laboratory experiments? The answer is no. You have to give strengths and weaknesses of laboratory experiment. Of course, in terms of description, AO1, that is only knowledge without application, but it should be strengths and weaknesses, not general features. Okay, so we can begin with this. Laboratory experiments employ a high degree of control over extraneous variables which gives them good credibility. They also follow A highly standardized procedure which gives them good reliability. However, these experiments typically involve tasks lacking in mundane realism, which decreases their ecological validity. Also, they usually collect quantitative data which makes their findings lack context and detail. Okay, so this is where my AO1 paragraph ends. Now I will come to the AO2 paragraph. In the given scenario, Ash has maintained a number of controls. For example, participants turn to answer has always been kept last. This ensures that every confederate answers before them, increasing their pressure to conform. The procedure of the study is also highly standardized with exactly 7 confederates placed before each participant. The use of the same comparison lines for each participant, the fixed position of the participant, always answering at the end, etc. However, the line task of conformity does not represent real life conformity tasks such as those involving maintaining silence in a library or waiting for one's turn in a queue. Besides, quantitative data was collected in terms of only the number of incorrect answers given by each participant. No qualitative data such as why participants gave incorrect answers was collected. Okay, so this is my EU2 paragraph. Now I will write my EU3 paragraph. The advantage of high degree of control is that internal validity is greatly enhanced. In Ash's study, it would be stated with confidence that conf- conformity was the reason for incorrect responses, incorrect answering, and nothing else. Standardization gives the strength of reliability. In the study, the consistency of procedure across participants ensures that every participant is yielding to conformity in exactly the same circumstances. However, the unrealistic nature of the task makes it difficult To conclude with certainty, that conformity of the extent seen in this study would be seen in real life scenarios as well. Finally, lack of qualitative insights makes it difficult to understand whether answers of confederates make participants unsure of their own answers, scared of giving wrong responses in their presence, or something else. Okay, so that completes our specimen paper. One last thing I would address here is many students ask me if they need to give introduction and conclusion to these type of answers, 12 markers or 9 markers. I strongly discourage from doing that. Though I know essay answers are always better with introduction and conclusion, but here it's better to be more specific because of one, we don't have so much time to include those things and those are not going to be marked, so there is no purpose also of writing an introduction or a conclusion. If we start, like I said, if we organize in the correct way, then in fact we won't even see a need for an introduction or conclusion. Like there's nothing irrelevant that we are adding or nothing that requires more context. We are being so direct that everything is evident by itself. So I would suggest following the same format that I have followed, but of course then it's up to your writing style. Okay, before the I end the video, I have one request. If you have any questions related to this video, please ask those questions in the comment section itself. That is what the comment section is made for. Do not contact me personally on my email ID or my telephone number. Don't message me to ask me questions about this video in particular, or questions which are not related to you wanting classes or tuitions. I will answer your questions if you put them through the correct channel. I respect your time. I hope you will respect mine too. Thank you so much for watching this video.